EP Magazine's annual Summer Fun issue has articles that focuses on fun activities, as well as helping reduce or avoid academic or behavioral regression over the summer. The disruption of familiar routines, environments, and limited access to school-based and other support services can be difficult for some children, especially those with special needs. Read it today at www.epmagazine.com.
Oscar Mike Radio is a proud podcast partner of REITs Across America Radio, heard every Thursday at 11 a.m. and Sunday at 8 a.m. Eastern. They're also big supporters of the nonprofit I Got Your Six, Two Lives at Once. And with every wreath you sponsor through Oscar Mike Radio, $5 goes back to this great organization dedicated to making a difference in the lives of veterans, law enforcement, firefighters, and first responders battling PTSD. Two Lives at Once pairs these brave men and women together with dogs rescued from kill shelters. In this way, two lives are saved at the same time by saving each other. Donate now. Go to reatsacrossamerica.org/Oscar Mike Radio to help. That's reatsacrossamerica.org/Oscar Mike Radio.
Suicide is preventable, and each of us has a role to play in suicide prevention.
Suicide is complex. There is no single cause.
And it's not always a mental health issue. It could be loss of a job or home, financial or relationship issues, pain, or leaving the military.
Suicide does not discriminate. It affects all ages, races, and genders, veterans or not.
If you know a veteran who is struggling, connect with them. Let them know help is available.
There is quick and easy access to services in times of crisis.
Dial 988, then press 1. Talking about it is okay.
Don't keep it inside. Don't be ashamed. Don't wait. Reach out.
Find resources at va.gov/reach.
Hello and welcome again to Oscar Mike Radio. My name is Travis. I am your host. Oscar Mike Radio is part of the Hoobazoo Network. You can find out more on hoobazoo.com. I want to thank my sponsors, Joyce Asek of Asek Real Estate, Army National Guard veteran Mark Holmes of Reapers Detailing and Power Washing, and my supporters, Kason Shaving Company, Exceptional Parent Magazine, and Black Cat Designs. Hey, when you see this, we're about halfway through 2024. The year is going fast. We're Oscar Mike. We're on the move. And I've got a different kind of guest with a different kind of show. But you know what? I wish I'd found this guest like 15 years ago. He's a Marine Corps veteran like myself. He's very accomplished outside the Marine Corps. And we're talking about his advocacy, which is the Warrior Scholar Project. Ryan Pavel. Welcome to Oscar Mike Radio, sir.
Hey, thank you so much for having me. You had it right the first time. The name is tricky, but the mnemonic, right, is always Pavel go to hell. That's, some people have more polite ways to say it, but that sticks.
All right, so I gambled and won for a change.
Trust your instincts. No, I'm really happy to be here. I appreciate the invite.
Absolutely. So, like I do with everybody, you're a Marine, so San Diego or Paris Island.
San Diego. It's the way to go.
Right. That's right.
See those planes taking off. You're standing online. You're just wishing you could be on one of those planes while you're getting smoked, right? And everybody else is getting taken on and off right at that airport there. It's killer, but that's what builds character.
People don't understand that really starts messing with your mind, especially
Oh
when
yeah.
the DIs say, "Hey, I'll give you a head start. It's right over there. You can get up. You could be home in 30 minutes if you just run, right?"
Yeah, just get it. That's right. Exactly. You can do it, but then you get on the other side and you take that flight off and you look down at all those recruits getting smoked. Oh, it's all worth it for that one flight out. Oh, the best.
That and I tell people when I got to the top of the Reaper, I felt like, you know what? No one can take that away from me. That was really something else.
That's right. And
That's right.
perhaps even more important than that accomplishment, that feeling of accomplishment is the breakfast that you get after the Reaper,
Oh,
right? When you just get to go and you're not shoveling food in 90 seconds, right? Oh,
that little moment in time, they treat you like a normal human being, but you got to earn it. You got to earn
that's
it.
right.
So you go to San Diego. What was your MOS in the Marine Corps?
So 2671, so I was an Arabic translator. So they ran me through that D lab, that defense language aptitude battery. They said you have the aptitude to learn a language. I said if you say so, because I had no idea what was going on in that test. And then before long, I'm learning Arabic.
So Farsi and all that?
Yeah, so we did. A few of my colleagues were Farsi, a few were Korean, and then they had a few other Spanish, French, and then the bulk of us at that time were doing Arabic, this was in 2006 and 2007 when I was at DLI, Defense Language Institute. So fortunately for me, I then actually deployed to a country where they spoke the language. Sometimes they would deploy Arabic linguists to Afghanistan. It's like, well, they don't. It's a different country. There's different languages, but I guess I got lucky in that regard.
So it's a really cool thing because I've heard like horror stories where you go there and you can't quite grasp it and you're booted back out to wherever you got to go.
Yeah.
And it's really mentally a intense school to go to.
Yeah, yeah. It is intense. Well, so look, so I one of the most visceral experiences of failure that I will think about in some regard and reflect on for the rest of my life came at the end of my time at DLI because it's so intense, right? And so I back up a little bit, I enlisted in the Marine Corps at 17. And a forcing function for me was getting rejected from the college I wanted to go to. I grew up in the Chicago suburbs, and so the place to go was University of Illinois. And they let a bunch of my friends in, right? And said, Ryan, yeah, you don't really got the grades. You don't have the extracurriculars. And you know what? They were right. I was a deeply apathetic, a very privileged kid, right? And I just I wasn't ended up in jail, but I certainly wasn't on anybody's dean's list. And, so I didn't get accepted. And that was a good time for me to say, okay, like let's wipe the slate clean. Let's do something. And the Marine Corps recruiter was persistent. The moment I talked to him, Staff Sergeant Salas, it's like, all right, let's sign. But I couldn't because I was 17, had to get my parents on board. They made me wait for a little bit. They said, if you feel strongly in a month, we'll sign. And they stuck to it. So, but that initial failure of getting rejected from college was a really important forcing function. So flash forward a couple of years later, right? I've studied Arabic. It's tough, right? In the Marine Corps detachment at DLI, right? You're in class with folks from the Air Force, from the Army, from the Navy, right? And it seemed like every other branch prioritized the language more than the Marine Corps. The Marine Corps was like, no, you're Marines first, right? Like we're still going to drill, we're going to bump and bound, right? Like we're going to do all of these things, and then sure, you go and learn Arabic. But still, right? You're 63 weeks or so there, and you're learning Arabic all day, every day. And the thing is, the grades are regionally accredited. Eventually, you can transfer these as college credits. But for purposes of the military, all that matters is one test. The entirety of what you're doing comes down to a single test and whether or not you can actually pass that. And so I took it, right? And I didn't pass. And that's that pivotal moment. The entire thing could come crumbling down. And so I had this rejection at 17, right? Okay, I'm back on the path. I'm doing all these things. And then 2 years into it, am I really going to have to go back to all of my friends and family and say, well, actually, I'm not going to be an Arabic translator. I'm going to be whatever they reclass me as. And I remember very clearly that visceral experience of seeing the printout of everybody's grades and just like everybody celebrating and taking a sigh of relief. And I just had to like step away and go find some time just to sit in my feelings for a little bit. Fortunately, they gave me another chance. They gave me an 8-week class, which actually ended up being, I learned more Arabic in those 8 weeks than I did for the remainder of like all the other time. One, because the stakes are incredibly high, but two, because it was really focused. There were only like 6 or 7 of us in the class with like 2 or 3 instructors. So we got a ton of really hands-on. So my Arabic skyrocketed. And then I was fortunate I got that second chance and then I passed. But yeah, there was a moment there. There was like, well, am I going to be an Arabic translator? Maybe not. Right? Maybe this isn't going to work out.
Well, I think that's so important because everybody thinks that we just fly through the boot camp, the coursework, and
Yeah.
then go on to the fleet. And I try to tell people, I'm like, look, man, boot camp has like a 38% attrition rate in the Marine Corps. Between 27 and 38% of people in my platoon was like half, right? And
Yeah.
then your A school is not a Glock either. There's people
Right.
who
Right.
wash out of those for many different types of
Right.
reasons. So, you adapted, you overcame, and you went through it. Did you serve more than 4 years in the Marine Corps, or did you get out after 4?
Yeah, funny thing. I mean, so I did 5.
Oh, wow.
Unbeknownst to me, right? So I originally enlisted. I was so gung ho, right? Put that on my contract, whatever. I was going to be public affairs, and then they'd had me take that D lab before I went to boot camp. And they said, "Oh, well, now you can be an Arabic translator." I said, "Okay, fine." And after I signed and switched my MOS, they said, "Oh, and by the way, that's because your school is over a year, and now you're going to be in for 5 years instead of 4." So a little bit of, bait and switch there. But the thing is, again, I'm 17. I don't care. Fine. What if 5 years? It's what I'm going to be 22 instead of 21. It's all in the future. It doesn't matter. Yeah, I mean, this is speaking of the Marine Corps, and recruitment and attrition rates and these things. I think it's fascinating how the Marine Corps, more than any other branch, relies on people getting out, right? The churn rate, the expected churn rate from the Marine Corps every year is like 35,000 Marines, right? Something like that. And they really are relying on people. I don't know what age you were when you enlisted, right? But 17 for me, right? Most of us are 17, 18, 19, jumping in and saying, whatever, 4 years, fine. I can do anything for 4 years, right? And the Marine Corps cares a lot less about retaining people, right? They expect more people to get out after that initial enlistment than any other branch. It's baked into their system. And I think that's really fascinating, right? That actually falls into this esprit de corps, the fact that we are so damn proud. I did 5 years, and for the rest of my life, I'm going to be eternally proud that I was in the Marine Corps, right? And that I was enlisted, right? Like these are things. But it's a really interesting philosophy. And then the Marine Corps is literally the only branch making the recruitment targets right now as well, right? So it really feeds into this psyche. They hit it by 21 people. They exceeded their target by 21 last year, which is amazing. 3 years in a row, the Marine Corps is the only branch that's hitting its recruitment targets. And so this whole process of like, it's going to be the hardest, right? It's going to be all of these things, right? More people are going to wash out. More people are going to only do 4 years and leave. And they're okay with that. Like it's such a fascinating culture and such a fascinating institution.
Well, change is forever. I mean, that is a fact. I tell people is you will never be the same again, whether you're in for 4
Yeah.
or 20. And
100%.
it's weird. I was led to believe they like the churn because it keeps the force young, and they
Yeah.
don't have any dead weight hanging around.
Yeah, absolutely. And you need people without a fully formed prefrontal cortex, right? Like, I mean, to be honest, like you need a bunch of people that are driven by vigor, that are driven by a desire to serve, that are willing to be able to follow orders. And there are some negative consequences to that, but I also really do think that there is something about this like young, vigorous force that doesn't need to sustain. Not everybody needs to be thinking about the pathway to 20-year careers or even 10-year careers, right? Like, no, do your service, go forth, and then be spokespeople as well for the service. That's part of the recruitment engine as well, right? Is the fact that we still talk about the Marine Corps, right? I mean, every branch does to an extent, but there is something. We are a weird breed, right?
Oh, for
In
sure.
that
I
regard.
mean, and that's the thing with the Air Force. They want you because that airframe is going to be around for 20, 40 years. And so they
Yeah,
need that, tech sergeant to be there working on the plane. So
yeah,
it
yeah.
makes sense. It makes sense. But I have my dings and scars and all that good stuff from my time in, but I wouldn't trade it for anything. I wouldn't trade it for anything.
I agree. I agree. I mean, this even ties into me leaving. I describe myself as once a Marine, always a cognitively dissonant skeptic, right? Meaning that I'm sort of a skeptical person by nature, but by the time that I got out, my skepticism was turned up to the nth degree,
Now,
right?
now wait a minute, Ryan. Wait a minute. Is it skepticism or cynicism? Which is
Well,
it?
so it depends. So when I was on deployment, it was definitely cynicism, right? Like now, I would say that then it turned into skepticism, right? But there is actually an important difference because it has been both. I think skepticism can actually be something which is really powerful. Cynicism doesn't really play much of a meaningful role in our lives, right? It is ultimately a negative emotion, where skepticism can be approaching something and viewing and saying, well, okay, is this actually what it's being sold to me as, right? Like, is this thing, how do I actually evaluate this? And so letting skepticism be your companion, right, as opposed to being something which is your controlling entity, I think can be incredibly powerful. And when I got out of the Marine Corps, I strongly disagreed with the war in Iraq, right? Like as an interpreter, right? Like as the things that I was doing, like I wanted nothing to do with it, right? It's the great irony in my life is that 14 years later, after getting out, all day, every day, I work with veterans and I love it. There's no job I'd rather have. But part of that, it's because I've seen so much of the own challenges that I've had reflected in other people, right? You can both have this fierce pride of service, right? This just undying, fierce pride in service. And it can really channel this, like unlock the skepticism of saying like, okay, like what was I actually a part of? And how do I then engage with others? How do I lift up a community? How do I serve this country in different ways? With it, it's not mutually exclusive. And I think that sometimes people try and flatten the military experience into one or the other. Either you are just, gung-ho, patriot, all of these things, red, white, and blue, screaming eagles, or you're somebody who's, protesting war. I don't know. I think that it's the truth honestly lies somewhere in between. And I think that that's true for a lot of veterans. There's more cognitive dissonance in our community than we generally let on.
I would agree with that. I mean, I'm like, if you're in, you should support, your nation, not Nathaniel Hale-esque, but fine. But on the other hand, to the Iraq war and Afghanistan, I'm like, the minute we found out WMDs weren't there, I'm like, why are we there then?
What are we doing? What are we doing?
The WMDs
and this was a big part of my big part of my process, right? I mean, when I got out, I knew I wanted to go to school. I'm not first gen. Most 2/3 of the enlisted veteran population are first generation college students if they decide to go to college. I had a familial structure to be able to say, hey, college is the thing that I should do, right? That was kind of baked in. So I didn't have as much a challenge as first gen college students do, but I was a non-traditional student, right? And so veterans being dropped into a college campus, and we can talk more about that because that's really what Warrior Scholar Project is all about. But Warrior Scholar Project didn't exist when I first got out. So even though I knew I wanted to go to school, and this was a year or two after the post 9/11 GI Bill came out, so there's these enormous benefits, right, that are available to me to get school paid for. The how, right, both in terms of getting admitted and then also in terms of ultimately being successful there was not really clear. Talk more about those steps in a sec, but I actually ended up really focusing a lot of my classwork, my major, wrote an honors thesis on this process called de-Baathification, which was part and parcel of starting the Iraq War, right? And sort of us saying anybody who was a member of Saddam's party can no longer serve in civic office, right? And so essentially what I was doing is taking a lot of the things that on the ground that we were translating, the work that we were doing there on the ground in Iraq, and then sort of from the safety of Ann Arbor, Michigan, looking at those things through a purely academic lens. And it was both kind of horrifying, right? Because I learned a lot more just about like, oh my God, reinforcing this, like, why were we there? But at the same time, it was also saying, okay, like I needed this as a person, right? I believe that I suffer from, and particularly then from this, moral injury, sort of this idea of moral injury where, you take these things with you, but it was very therapeutic, even though I went to a darker place when I was analyzing all these things and reading, but I needed that as part of my process to be able to think about what I do. And that also helps inform all of my decisions moving forward. How do I want to allocate my energy? How do I intentionally want to be able to make decisions that are, in my view, right, a net benefit for society? So to your point, service changes you, right? I'm a fan of saying that no matter what branch somebody served in the modern military, everybody raised their right hand voluntarily to subjugate a portion of their freedom. That matters, right? Serving something bigger than yourself matters. It changes you. And that is a net benefit. That is a positive thing. So a lot of my journey has been, how do I take the positive things from that and really be able to make informed decisions moving forward?
So before we go on to the next part of your journey, just let me unpack that a little bit. Do you think there's some, not really, fallout is not the right word, but definitely some lingering effects? Because in my mind, I swore the oath, right? I swore the oath, but I thought about my separation and TAPS and all that. And I'm like, part of my thing is I never revoked that oath in my mind. Do you think that's on purpose, or do you think that does something to us where, because we're out of the military, but we don't ever really formally revoke that oath, that it does stick with us?
Yeah. It's an interesting perspective, right? Because it's not like, your contract ends, but you still took the oath, right? And so technically the obligations that are imposed on you by that oath are over. But mentally, I mean, I think it goes back to this principle, right? Service changes a person. And so you can never really put that genie back in the bottle, right? Like that thing is now released. you have served, and service will change you. And my argument, again, is that there's a positive aspect. I think it's part of the glue. I think it's part of why veterans get along, right? Why you and I can just immediately start having a conversation, right? Because we have some sort of shared bond. And yes, for us, that's specific to the Marine Corps, but it's also more broad, right? I think that there's something about that extends to the veteran community, and veterans want to be able to help each other. They want to be able to find ways to be able to serve each other, right? And serve others. And I think that's great. And I think a lot of that comes from the oath, right? I mean, and I think about it, again, because of the nature of my work, I think about transition all the time. But one of the interesting realizations for me is, look, I don't think, again, I was a very apathetic high schooler. I don't think I ever actually read the Constitution, right? And then here I am at 17, raising my right hand to swear to uphold and defend the Constitution against all enemies, foreign and domestic, to bear true faith and allegiance to the same, right? To obey the orders of officers and the president appointed over me. Like, that is unbelievable that I'm doing that for a document that I've never actually read. That is a fascinating thing, right? And then I went to law school, right? And we teach the Constitution as well at Warrior Scout. Now I've read it all these times, and I keep unpacking different meanings. But just reflecting again on, like, 17-year-old Ryan was upholding something that he had no idea what it was. So in that regard, that always really sticks with me. And yeah, I don't think that, you don't revoke the oath formally. And I think that a lot of ways implicitly, I think you're exactly right. It stays with you. And whether people express it that way or otherwise, they're continuing to live out that oath.
So you're like 22, 23 when you get out. Where does it get in your mind that, okay, I've done the Marine Corps, and now I'm going to go to school? But you didn't just go to school, Ron. You didn't do anything halfway. You went to school and then went and got your law degree. And then I'm like, okay. And then you started Warrior Scholar Project. We'll get into that. But where did the real commitment to your education post-service come in? Because you had to really push all in on yourself to maintain that commitment, right?
Yeah, definitely. Well, so I consider myself fortunate in a lot of different ways. And one of them is, again, as I describe myself, as emphatically not first gen, which is to say, my father's a physician, my mother had her master's in counseling, my grandfather's a physician. So college was just part of my upbringing, right? And so I'm thankful for that, because it was never really a question for me about whether or not I would go to school. The other thing that allowed me to do is I knew enough about higher education to know that I should ignore the predatory for-profit schools that were marketing really aggressively to veterans and saying, oh, it's so easy to get your bachelor's, just click here, right? Just enroll in these classes. We accept all the benefits, right? We'll customize to your schedule, right? Something about that didn't pass the smell test for me. And so I wanted to push myself, right? I had conversations with people. I found out, I went to Google, right, and typed in literally Arabic college and veterans, right? And I applied to the schools that popped there because I thought that I wanted to continue to study Arabic. One of those schools was University of Michigan. They have a really strong Arab American presence in and around University of Michigan in Ann Arbor, and then in Dearborn. And so I applied there, right? And even before I talk about that journey more, that's one of the challenges in the enlisted veteran community. So there are 1.5 million enlisted veterans that do not yet have a college degree. Of the 180 to 200,000 that are getting out every year, about 100,000 are enlisted service members starting higher education. So there is this enormous population. And then we talk about the challenges in the for-profit side. 7 of the top 10 recipients of GI Bill dollars are for-profit institutions. University of Phoenix alone collected $1.6 billion in VA benefits from 2013 to 2021. And the VA overall is spending $11 billion a year on higher education. So it's this enormous industry, right? And there are not nearly enough ways right now to get enlisted veterans who are not already thinking, again, at the level that I was, because I just naturally got lucky, right? I lived in a house where higher education was prioritized and thought of. If I didn't have that, I would have been much more likely to just say yeah, sure, I'll go to whatever school is marketing me. They make it easier for me to get my degree. Bachelor's is just kind of a check in the box. Yeah, this is the next step. Click apply, right? And then I would go forth and do that. So that's what we see for a lot of the enlisted veteran population. That is a deep systemic issue. TAP was not helpful when I got out in 2010, and it's marginally less bad now in 2024, frankly. It's gotten better in terms of helping people secure their next paycheck, right? Like DoD Skill Bridge and those things have been helpful. But in terms of higher education, so much of the ball game with higher education is about the mentality, right? It's about being intentional about your decisions. I have these benefits. Oh my goodness, I have this military experience. And just because I enlisted doesn't mean that I missed the boat on a great education. Okay, you need somebody to be able to buy into that before they apply, before they spend their job, before they get their bachelor's degree. That's hard work, right? Because you have to hit people at that pivotal time of transition. So for me, wanted to go to school, applied to Michigan. All right. I'm thinking I got rejected at 17 from University of Illinois. All right. I had that failure when I failed my Arabic test, right? But then I was able to overcome, I was able to do that, get a couple of deployments. I'm good now. And University of Michigan rejected me, right? And I thought, oh, what the hell? What's going on here, right? Like I thought I was finally going to get some success here. And I was a stronger advocate for myself at that point. And so I called the admissions office, not to argue, but just to say like, hey, I was really interested in being there. I want to reapply. Like, what can I do? And I got paired with somebody who had reviewed my application, and she said, look, like there's good things about your application, but you haven't shown us you can be a good student. It's a really compelling point, right? And so I went and enrolled. I had 3 months left active duty. And so my command didn't know what to do with me at the time. They were too lazy to set up a skiff, right, at Camp Lejeune. And so we didn't actually have any work that we could do as Arabic translators. And so fine, go enroll in on-base community college. So I did. Right. And then I was able to leverage those classes into getting admitted in that same cycle that I had been rejected in at Michigan. So as a much stronger advocate, right? Like I had more of a vision in terms of I want to go somewhere that's going to push me. Michigan seems like a great school. They have this program I'm interested in, and I'm going to try and make that happen. And that's essentially how I ended up in Ann Arbor in 2010.
You're going through school. Does it feel like anything you've ever done before in terms of the training you got in the Marine Corps, going through language school, or did you dive right in, get adjusted, and then was able to make the transition to being a student, fairly easily? How is it like for you?
Yeah. I wouldn't describe it as being fairly easy. I mean, I like to think that I have a pretty good head on my shoulders, and I'm a relationship-driven person. And so I was fortunate that I was not afraid to ask people questions at that stage in my life, right? Like I knew that if I wanted to maximize that experience, that I'm gonna have to put myself out there a little bit. Again, I'm fortunate in the way that I was raised that like that's okay, right? That's okay to be able to do, to advocate and to be able to ask questions and not just to kind of isolate. Having said that, no matter what my thoughts were in the Marine Corps, I had a unit, right? I had a group that they were my people, right? And like some of them I deployed with twice, but I came back from my second deployment, right? And whatever, 5 or 6 months later, I'm on a college campus, that whirlwind. You have this mission accomplishment. You build this resiliency, right? You gripe together, right? You bitch and moan about everything, but you trauma bond, right? You do all of these things together, right? And you actually, you accomplish a lot as a unit. And then suddenly I'm one of 28,000 undergrads on the Michigan campus, right? And I'm a transfer student because I had those Arabic credits, right? And so I had the community college credits. It's just like, who are my people, right? Where's my crew? And that hit me. That hit me really hard. Combined with the fact that because of my feelings in the military, I initially didn't want to associate with a veteran identity. I wasn't going to like deny that I was in, but I didn't want that to be, hi, I'm Ryan. I'm a Marine Corps veteran. And I guess I'm here to take classes, right? I wanted to like, okay, let me be in college, let me be a college student. But it turns out the veteranness is a big part of me. It changed me to our conversation. Like service changed me. I think mostly for the better, right? But I also had some really strong opinions about things. And so it was not particularly easy. Where again, I was really fortunate is that I had some fellow student veterans that I met, through the local vets club and those things that were a few steps ahead of me in the process, that had taken a few semesters, that had said, okay, right, like here are some of the things to think about. Here are some classes to take, right? Here are some other things you can get involved in. And I built that bond with them. And fortunately, some of them also advised me not to stay too insular to the veteran community. This is one of the big issues that people make, right? Veterans, when they get out, even if they go and they're doing, in-person, on-campus programming, and they're doing these things, they still either isolate to themselves or within the veteran community.
True.
But the true nature, the power of college is that it pushes you to think. It makes you uncomfortable. You're engaging with people from communities that are vastly different from your own. So piercing that bubble and bringing together these various pieces of identity, I had some people that encouraged me to do that. And that led to a much more positive, much more beneficial experience because I had people that I could rely on that were really pushing my thinking.
You do your college experience. When did law school start? Because I thought that was very interesting that in addition to, your studies, you chose to get into law.
I liked the idea. I started to get decent at networking, and not in the sense of like bad reception with bad crab cakes and that kind of thing, but networking in the sense of just like saying, oh, hey, I want to talk to somebody who's in this type of school. I want to talk to people who are physicians. I want to talk to people who are attorneys. Michigan is a great law school, so I had access to other veterans that were in law school at Michigan. And I got really interested in law school because it can be an understanding of law can help you understand the building blocks of our society, the fabric of our society. So it's a way of thinking. People talk about thinking like a lawyer. They mean different things when they say that. But it is at its best, I believe, a way for you to be able to access all the information, every news story, everything that's happening, right? Every interaction through this certain frame of reference. I really liked that idea, right? I wanted to be a critical thinker. I thought that this could be something that would really help me do it. So I got interested in law. I'm also really interested in education, in teaching. And so what I ended up doing is I had some time in my last semester as a senior to take the LSAT. And I thought, all right, I'm going to bottle that, right? Like I'm going to study for the LSAT. If I want to apply to law school, great. But I also found an organization called Teach for America, which is taking people that have not majored in education, but that have an interest in helping to close the achievement gap and working in schools that are either underrepresented populations, low income schools, places that really need teachers, and to be able to take people and give them a crash course in education and put them in these situations. And I thought, hey, okay, I've been in some bad situations, right? I made it through that. I'm interested in education. I like teaching. I liked this challenge. Let me take the LSAT. Let me go teach. And turns out teaching high school in Detroit was the hardest job I've ever had. Not only up until that point, but through today, right? And I've had some tough jobs. It's incredibly tough and really eye-opening in terms of perspectives for different stratas of our society and what it looks like to, again, I'm very transparent about the fact that I had a privileged upbringing, like great school system, but not everybody has that. And so I learned a ton. My students, learned what I needed them to learn, but it was tough. And so I knew pretty early on in that I wanted to actually then pursue law school. And so I did. So I applied to a bunch of law schools and was really fortunate to get admitted to the University of Virginia and spent some time in Charlottesville and spent 3 years there.
You've accomplished so much, and in a way, you could have taken the time after you graduate from law school to really set up your career in a way where you start seeing the benefits of your hard work, but you choose instead to start the Warrior Scholar Project. What did you see in the veteran community that prompted you to say, you know what, there's a problem here, and I'm going to start looking at a way to correct that problem?
Yeah. So there is, again, one of the themes here is I'm going to identify the areas that I was lucky. There was a group of people, 3 students at Yale. Yale had very few student veterans at the time in 2011 that got together and said, hey, what if we brought veterans here and we ran them through a version of our class, and it could help inspire them maybe to apply to Yale, but to believe in themselves. And it would also bring more veterans to campus so we could bring in administrators and faculty that Yale could see what the power is of these enlisted veterans. And so those 3 enterprising young Yale law students, or not Yale Law, just Yale students, they founded the initial branch of Warrior Scholar Project. So I got involved early on, but I don't think of myself, not only in this context, I am not a founder, they're the founders, but I don't think of myself even just as my persona in the world as that of a founder. I think I'm much more a builder, right? I'm somebody that can take a concept, something that people have started, that they've gotten off the ground, and I can come in, I think, at the right place and think about how do we maximize this? How do we grow it? And so I'm fortunate that they started it, right? And that then I found them through a fellow Marine who was one of the other students at Yale who was volunteering with them and said, hey, come check this out. They want to expand. And I flew out in 2013, got to see it. and they dropped me into a classroom that was, you know, a bunch of tatted up vets, and they're going toe to toe on Alexis de Tocqueville's equality of conditions argument, right, with this Yale professor. And it was just like, what universe is this? What's happening here, right? Like the level of discourse and engagement was astounding. And so they gave us permission to launch a branch of it at my alma mater at Michigan. So we put together a crew and we did that. So I founded that branch of WSP. And for all my time throughout law school, that was the most rewarding thing, right? Was carving out a couple weeks each year to go and run this boot camp, to take enlisted veterans to this campus and run them through this boot camp. And you can see the change happening. You can build those skills. You can build that confidence. You can build the network. You can do all of that in a really short period of time, right? I mean, WSP is intensive. It's like 75 hours of work per week.
What?
That's why the thing works, right? Like if you throw down the gauntlet for a bunch of enlisted veterans and you say, look, you're sleeping in the residence halls, they're fine, right? They're better than some of the barracks you stayed in, right? You're going to eat the dining room food, right? Like, okay, it's better than like, especially the Marine Corps. Like our food was just awful, right? But you can do all of these things, but you are going to be immersed in the college environment, and it's going to be worth it, right? We're going to show you how to really be able to attack the Tocqueville. We're going to show you what it's like to be able to be a college student later in life. Seeing that transformation was the best part of my year, right? And being able to be a part of it. So after law school, I worked in corporate litigation for a hot minute. And then I had an opportunity in 2018 to come on board full-time to Warrior Scholar Project. And I didn't look back.
So looking forward, or was it going forward in reverse, the Pink Floyd song? I forget. Anyway, but looking forward, what are you trying to do with the Warrior Scholar Project? Is it you're trying to sit there and say to a veteran who's not sure about education, this is what I want to do, and you're going to help them get there? Or is there a certain, you know, profile of veteran you're trying to help? Kind of unpack that for me, please.
Yeah, definitely. So we firmly believe, we've seen it. We've been around for, this is our 13th year of programming. We've had about over 2,000 enlisted veterans go through our program. We firmly believe that every enlisted veteran has what it takes to kick ass in higher education and beyond. They have the raw materials to be able to do that. There's a way to be able to leverage that experience. But that doesn't mean that that's the right path for every single veteran. So there's a big difference in between not going and getting your undergraduate degree or a graduate degree because you've looked through your options and you don't want to, versus self-selecting out because you don't think you have what it takes. So we want everybody to understand, every veteran that is interested in higher education, you have what it takes to be able to do this. So we are all about helping people make informed decisions about higher education. What are my benefits? What's the difference between all these different types of schools? What do I want to study? How do I want to bring all of those things together? And that's what WSP is about. Now we do that through the lens of humanities, STEM, and business. So we tell people after our course, we don't care if you remember Tocqueville's equality of conditions argument. What we care about is you internalizing that process of being intimidated by this reading, then actually going through it, doing something successful with it, and then coming out the other end. That confidence really matters. That is our mission first and foremost for the folks that we serve through our academic boot camps. Another important part of WSP's mission now is taking those lessons and expanding it to the wider enlisted veteran population. So with my co-author, my director of education, we're writing the Warrior Scholar Field Guide, right? Which is taking all of these lessons and distilling it into a field guide that we want to make publicly available, where people can say, here's what it looks like for the thousands of Warrior Scholars that have gone through our program. Here's how they've achieved success, and here's where they are now. Here are the mentalities and here are the skills that they've implemented in order to be able to get to that stage. So that's part of our goal, is widening that circle from the folks that we just serve at the boot camps.
I'm looking up Tocqueville's understanding of conditions of equality and inequality, and this is going to be heady reading. Well, I just had to. I'm like, that's right. I've never heard of it, honestly. So I'm learning.
It's this formative argument. Yeah.
No. Anyway, coming back to where you're with the program now. My thing is, I tried college and after the Marine Corps and did better than I thought I was going to. But now I'm older and I'm like, well, it's a real hassle. I've got to come up with money or go to my employer. I don't want to do that. And it's not that I don't want a degree. I think I would like to have a degree. is just understanding for me, why should I sacrifice the time and hassle to invest at this point in my life and career to pursue a college degree versus not doing it? Because I've seen peers sacrifice time with family, things in their own career to try to make this step. That's what I struggle with. And a lot of
Yeah.
my peers are like, you know what? I'm 40 years old, 60 years old, and I'm just not sure it's worth the hassle. I mean,
Yeah.
is that a legitimate thing you run into, or what do you
Yeah.
say to that?
So not only is it legitimate, I think it is the thing. So
Okay.
here's what I would tell you. If anybody purports to have an answer to that question for you, then they're full of it. Tell them to go kick rocks, right? Because the only person that can actually answer that question and have it actually achieve the outcome that you desire is you. So let me give you a specific example, right? So we've talked about the fact that I went to law school, worked in corporate litigation for a bit, long enough to understand what that practice of law at a big law firm is actually like. We talk to a lot of veterans. A lot of veterans have an interest in pursuing some type of law. So if I find out that somebody is, they're an E5, they're getting out of the Marine Corps, they want to get their undergrad, they want to be an attorney, they want to do all these things. Okay, great. My first question to them is, have you talked to any attorneys, right, who are doing the thing that you purportedly want to do? If the answer to that question is no, then my response to them is like, I'm not going to help you with application advice right now. Like, let me help you connect to attorneys who are doing the work, right? There's this great, the Cheshire Cat, Alice in Wonderland. If you don't know where you're going, any road will get you there, right? And so if people have this super broad notion of, okay, well, attorneys, I've seen them in court, right? I'm watching the trials and, these things, and they make a lot of money. So, well, maybe, right? But there's a deep sense of dissatisfaction in the legal profession from a lot of attorneys, right? And there's a lot of substance abuse, right? And there are systemic reasons for that. Not that all attorneys are miserable, but you should do your research first in terms of understanding the humanality of it, right? The human connection, to be able to understand, okay, if I can find somebody who's doing the thing that like they're satisfied with their career, and then I can ask them, hey, how did you get there? Right? What are the things that you did? Now, some things are obvious. They went to law school. Okay, fine, right? But there's a bunch of places to go to law school. There's a bunch of internships you can do. So you have to be able to find that thing. Until somebody can actually articulate the why of why they want to go to college, our advice, like not just my Brian Pavel advice, our organizational advice is like, just pump the brakes, right? Like, if you can't answer why college, let alone where, let alone what I want to study, let alone the how, like all of those questions matter. But the why is the thing. And nobody can answer that question except for you. And the only way that I know to really get the best data for you customized to that is to spend time reflecting on it, right? And then to really be able to do your research, not just through Google, but to be able to use a network to be able to build connections to people. So say for you, Travis, you're at a stage in your career that you think like, okay, well, like this is good, but there's something else that I would like to do, maybe within this company or elsewhere, right? If you are just trying to like scattershot, I'll get this degree. People do this all the time with MBAs. Oh my God, MBAs are the worst for this. It's kind of like, oh, like I want to, progression, business. I'll get an, what? Why? Well, the MBA industry also knows that. So they cater to people that are at that stage. They're just kind of like, like I'm dissatisfied. This will help, surely. Oh boy, right? So really understanding where you want to go and answering that question first can then help you back it out and to say, okay, where I am in life, what are the other components of this? Now, how much is this going to cost? What are the benefits? Where can I go? What's the family situation? All of those things are second and third order questions from that essential question of why. And until somebody can answer that, pause. Do that research first.
So, not that let's just use me as an example. Because I thought about this. This is actually very interesting. I mean, I'm like, I'm pretty good at what I do. I'm in cybersecurity. So come to find out, you don't need a degree. You have to have technical, procedural, and other experience to actually add value to the organization that sometimes you can't get in school.
Yeah.
So I'm thinking about this because I've asked myself this question before, Ryan. I'm like, why would I want to go to college?
Yeah.
Is it to make my friends happy? Is it to put some letters behind my name?
Sure.
Why do I want to go to college? And I'm like,
right.
It's kind of like anything. Let's go back to the Marine Corps, for example. It's kind of like, well, it's a challenge out there. And I feel like I'm missing out because I haven't met that challenge. But on the other hand, I'm like, well, I'm meeting the challenge every day without it.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that's my first thing.
Yeah.
Second thing is, I'm gonna be honest with you, Ryan.
Yeah.
I loathe having to fill out those freaking applications. I went to a small liberal arts school in Boston, great little place, Fisher College, and I'm like, I couldn't believe how you got to write a freaking book to go back to take a couple classes. I'm like,
Yeah.
what is this?
Yeah.
I'm like,
Yeah.
I'm out. I'm
Yeah.
out. I don't want to bother.
Yeah.
I don't have time for it.
Yeah.
So there's where I'm at. And then the final thing is like, am I really smart enough to go to college? I mean, it
Mm.
seems like you got to be pretty on there. I mean, I think I'm smart, but I don't know if I'm smart.
Yeah. Yeah.
So those are the three things I deal with. And the reason I bring them up is talking to some of my peers who don't have degrees, veterans, that's kind of how we feel. We've
Yeah.
attained a level of success
Right.
without a degree.
Right.
We're doing pretty good in life without one. It's
Right.
going to take a huge amount of time to get that piece of paper. And then there's just, it seems like a lot of overhead along with actually going to
Sure.
class and doing the work.
Sure. Well, I mean, so one of those questions has an easy answer, right? Are you smart enough? Yes. Right. Again, I say this from the perspective of one, I mean, you have demonstrable experience that proves that, Travis, right? But for other people that are earlier on, say you're an E4 and say you're an MOS that you just kind of like did for the sake of doing it, and now you're 21, you're 22, and you're thinking like, I missed the boat. That's the thing, is that again, Warrior Scholar Project, we partner with top tier institutions because we want our students to be able to show, we want them to be able to understand that they have the ability, they can succeed in the classroom at one of these great institutions. But it's not to say you have to go to one of those institutions to succeed. Again, it's about being an informed consumer. So you build the confidence. I have yet to meet a veteran that does not have what it takes to get a bachelor's degree at an excellent institution, period. And I've been doing this for a long time, right? Like I've been in this game for a minute, and I've talked to veterans from all manners. So everybody has what it takes. But to your other questions, I'm going to go back to my answer from before. It's why. So think about if your why is flimsy, if you're like, if I'm doing this because there's some like societal pressure, or this like seems like something that I should do, right?
I can't answer the why question, Ryan.
Yeah. So you've got some work to do. You've got some work to do, because otherwise you're going to go through that application, right? And you're going to say like, oh my God, there's 30 forms. Are you kidding me? Like this is stupid,
like, forget
right?
this, I'm out.
If the why is not strong enough, right? If that's flimsy, if that's a shaky leg of your plan here, then it's going to crumble, right? Or you make it through the application even worse. Okay, I've moved on from my job, or I've gone part-time at my job to be able to make this. I've moved my family, all these things. And then you're in class, right? And you're like, oh my God, like these students, they're all idiots, right? Like they don't have the experience that I have. So there's this subtext to our class, right, that we have for these college success sessions, which I love, because the subtext is essentially like, quote, these 18-year-olds, because somebody says it every cohort that I've been a part of, right? They say like, what do these 18-year-olds have to teach me about life, right? And the answer is a lot. Right? If you listen, and it doesn't mean that you have to agree with them. It doesn't matter what your political persuasions are either, right? Like there's this whole notion now, DE&I and this sort of thing that's sweeping the nation, and anti-DE&I legislation. Breaking that down, I think that we're missing the point when we talk about DE&I all the time. If you have a group of people that have diverse experiences, and all of them feel like they have an equal state at the table, right, to be able to voice their opinions, and all of them feel included in that conversation, the basic building blocks of DE&I, everybody should be able to get on board with the value of the sort of conversation that would happen there. Now, where this gets really, like where dollars allocated and what does it mean to you, but putting all of that aside, again, if you are a veteran and you are in a classroom with quote unquote these 18-year-olds, or people that look different than you, or people that talk like good, like you should be thinking, you should be pushed. So the value of a college education, right? Later in life, I think it's harder to be able to do this, because at some point you have a career, maybe you have more of an established family, right? And so maybe it is more of a credential, but I think that a huge part of the value of college is being exposed to perspectives that push you, that make you uncomfortable. There's a retired Navy SEAL, James Hatch. He's at Yale right now as an undergrad. He's in his 50s. He writes a decent amount about his experience there. And he had this incredible essay after his first semester. It's called My Semester with the Snowflakes. So good. So good. And one of the things that James talks about here is he says, Look, my conception of a safe space, when somebody would mention a safe space, I would bristle, right? Like, ugh, safe space. What are you talking about? Like, I'm a Navy SEAL, right? Like, I just did a whole career as a SEAL. You're going to talk about a safe space here on a college campus. So that over the course of that semester, what he realized is that when people are advocating for safe spaces, these diverse, this rich conversation, what they're doing in the best version of this is they're celebrating the fact that the college environment is deliberately calculated so that you can share opinions that are out there, right? And you can receive those opinions and you have a deliberate space to be able to do that thing because you know that the community that you're in is going to receive that in the way in which it's intended, right? And I love that flipping on its head of what it means. Again, capital D, capital D, E, capital I, safe spaces, wokeness, right? It's turned into this thing where people feel like, oh my God, like, is this really where look, getting diverse perspectives and being able to express that and also to be able to extract value from it, that is part of the value. So there is this non-insubstantial, sort of more ethereal version of gaining perspective that I think is really vital for college. But I go back to my original conception. If you haven't done the legwork to understand really why you want to do that, right? Why that credential, because it is a time investment. Even if for people that have GI Bill benefits to cover it, the opportunity cost of your time is huge. So you have to have that really strong why. And I know of no way to be able to get that other than conversation with people that are on the other end of it that can then give you advice and say, this credential is actually worthwhile and here's the reason for it. Right? If you have those sort of building blocks and you approach it with this right mindset, with this open learner's mindset, it's amazing. Like that is the sort of thing that leads to a really lasting experience in college.
So real quick, I pulled up the article. He's 52 when he writes this, which I'm like, wow, okay, this gives me perspective for a lot of reasons. But you're not going to believe this, Ryan. 2 days ago, I'm like, how would I go to Chat GTP and I write, how would I study to pass the mass bar exam without going to law school? That's a whole other podcast why I'm even looking at it, but it is. And I'm like, I kind of want to see if I could pass the bar exam for no other reason. I find the study of law very interesting to me. I'm not sure I want to be an attorney.
Right.
I've had to be in court before for other reasons, and you're right. It's people don't understand the personal cost for a lawyer.
Yeah,
it does something to them. But I do like the fact that the law is not black and white. The law is malleable based on several factors, and I find that very interesting that people think the law is a 1 or a 0, but justice is blind for a reason, Ryan. So anyway, I'm interested in it, and I'm like, maybe we should have talked. What I'm trying to say is, I think there's a reason why we talked, because for me, it's just something that I've never really done, but maybe I could do. And so the Warrior Scholar Project seems like more than just you run a nonprofit to run a nonprofit. Like, you have like a real, like, I get the impression this is like a real personal thing with you, Ryan.
Yeah.
Why is that?
Yeah. I tell people, sort of 2 things. One is I feel WSP in the fiber of my bones, right? Like I feel this thing. There's this deep connection. The other thing I tell people is that, like, what you see is what you get with me, right? Like, there was a period of time within WSP where I was a bit more cautious, right? Like, if I say something, like, am I going to upset a certain, but like, the reality is that the authenticity, so we actually just went through a values exercise with our team to really, redefine what our values are, check in with our values as an organization. And authenticity is this really critical thing, I think, in anything in life. But I'm really proud that is a core value at WSP. We're going to embrace things and we're going to be our whole ass selves, right? Like, we are going to be able to bring those things to work. And that's not to say that everybody has to merge life and work to the same extent. But for me, like, it's inseparable. This is personal because I went through this transition, but then also personal because of the number of people's lives that I've seen changed as a result of it, right? Like, people that are going, and then the ripple effect of that is enormous. So we are about education, right? Our eligibility criteria is you have to be enlisted and not yet have an undergraduate degree to go through a boot camp. Those are the 2 eligibility criteria. it's about education, but it's really about something that's through the lens of education that we think about how do you take that unifying thing of raising your right hand and having sworn to uphold and defend the Constitution, regardless of whether you've read it, which I think most enlisted veterans like me didn't read it before they actually raised their right hand.
I didn't.
See, there you go. Sorry, we got two right here. But how do you take that? How do you channel that into post-service impact? Because I truly believe that this is a vital thing for our country, right? Like this is the sort of thing that you take the positive aspects of service, the ways in which that changed us, and education is the force multiplier, especially if education is done in the right way, where it's not just a check in the box. That's why online education plays a role. There's great nonprofit education, even for-profit degrees sometimes can play the right role, right? Like it's not just a ones and zeros thing. It's not all binary, right? But education at its best is pushing people's thinking, right? It is really actually forcing you to interrogate who you are and what you want to do, and you channel those perspectives into what comes next. I firmly believe, and we've seen it time and time again, that veterans can take those things, they can mesh military service, they can use that in the soup of higher education and keep on seasoning it. And what comes out the other end are people that are really well positioned to shape our society in a meaningful way. These are people that have subjugated a portion of their freedom. These are people that have sworn that oath, and these are people that have invested their time in college, not just for the degree, but to be able to both give and take from that community. That is the sort of thing that you need in terms of people that are really going to go and make that clear, unmistakable impact on our country. So yeah, it's personal because the thing really matters, right? It matters, and I've seen it.
Winding this down, and time has flown because we're having so much fun. I'm just learning a whole lot to let you know. What is it like when you take like I wouldn't call me a non-believer, but, and not really a skeptic. I'm not being skeptical about this, but somebody who wasn't really sure, hey, do I really have what it takes to do this? And they go through your boot camp, they go through your program, and you have an amazing support team around WSP, and they walk down the aisle. What's it like for you and your team seeing that happen, man?
Yeah, it gives it just infinite chills, right? Like it never gets old. It never gets old. There are no matter how many people go through the boot camp, it never gets old because everybody's an individual. We talk about things in these generalities of like, I do think it's important that like, what are the shared things that we take away from military service, but everybody's individual. Everybody's background is different. You don't know what is on other people's minds. You don't know what their ambitions are until you ask, right? And even then you're only going to get one view of it. So taking those individuals and using this tried and true method, this really intensive, authentic method to be able to help them understand they have what's next, like that they have whatever it takes to accomplish whatever comes next. It's the best. It's intoxicating. There's a reason, again, like you can imagine going from a corporate law firm job to the nonprofit, right? Like I'm well compensated, right? Like it's not sort of like woe is me by any stretch of the imagination, but that jump was significant in 2018.
Right.
But I wouldn't take it back for a second.
Not for a second.
There isn't a single moment of hesitation that I would have made this because this thing is real and it works.
So as a nonprofit, I always ask this, how can people support WSP's mission? And we're talking to Ryan Pavel of the Warrior Scholar Project, U.S. Marine Corps veteran. How can people help you keep this mission going?
Sure. Two things, right? One is, you mentioned our nonprofit. So of course, donations are always the thing we'll raise about we have to raise about $5 million this year, right? Our budget is anticipated to increase by about $500,000 to $750,000 over the next 5 years per year. So it's going to, we need to raise some money. But beyond that, it is also about, if there are enlisted veterans in your lives and you're listening to this thing and you think about like, hey, this person is pursuing education, or maybe they are still an active duty service member, right? About 50% of the population that goes through WSP each summer is active duty. About 40% are separated veterans, and about 10% are reserve or guard. So as long as they are enlisted and they don't yet have an undergraduate degree and they have some sort of interest in those next steps in education, send them the website, warrior-scholar.org. There's a lot of testimonies, a lot of impact data on there.
I will have that in the Oscar Mike Radio show post, Ryan, and also in the website post so people can click on it and see it. And I'll tell my watchers and listeners this, there is a wealth of information on here about the programs you have.
Yeah.
Got to have you back on because I think we just scratched the surface of this.
Let's do it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Then you can tell me about what you've done to investigate your own why, right? Then I'll come back at you. I'm going to check in. I'm going to say, all right, Travis, we talked. Where'd you go with it?
Let's do it like that. Right now, we're going to do it right now. I'm going to really investigate the why because, I think, and I'm not being like glib or coy here, I know we just talked as a podcast and as a show, but I'm like, that is why, though I haven't done the why to do the action. I've kind of batted it around. I haven't really found out why I don't want to do the why.
Yeah.
Or why should I want to do the why? So I'll make that promise to you. I will absolutely look at my why and we'll come down. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So closing this out, what's next for you all in terms of growth or outreach for WSP?
Yeah, I appreciate the question. So we went through a long strategic planning process. We spent a year on it. It was lovely. It was so hard. It was one of the hardest things, like, to be able to get the buy-in for this thing and get all these opinions. But like, it was so good, right? Because I have all these people that are really dedicated to what we do, making our strategic plan. So we are 4 months into a 5-year strategic plan. We're going to keep growing our boot camps. We're going to keep growing our partners there. We're going to do that judiciously. Our commitment to a student is no matter where you go to a WSP boot camp, the quality of service is going to be the same. That's hard. Quality control nationwide is hard, and we're committed to it. We are going to continue to grow our alumni services. You go through a boot camp and then what, right? Okay, now I want to get a job. Now I want to go to graduate school. Now I want to do these things. We are continuing. We have a lot of these things in motion, but we are going to continue to build it. The connective tissue in between your career and your education, like that good stuff. And then this third bucket of expanding outside of just the WSP network. So I mentioned the field guide. This has been a labor of love. It's like one of my favorite projects I've worked on for a long time. We actually have like 2 weeks until it goes to print. So we better finish this thing up pretty quickly for our summer boot camps. But the intent is we're going to use it for the boot camps this summer. We're going to collect a lot of feedback on it, and then we're going to make it available, right? We want to seek publication of it. So all the lessons that we've learned, all the things you and I are talking about here, the richness of this experience of thousands of people that have gone through this program, bottling that and saying, here's what's worked for them. Here's how they found their why, right? And here's how you can do that as well. So expanding the outreach there. And related to that, we're going to do an on-demand version. So they think about like a Coursera style course, free course that people could go through. That's going to be, it has to be really well produced to keep people's attention, but that's part of how we're going to widen the impact so that we can actually move the needle for the overall enlisted veteran population. So we've got some work to do.
I got some work to do. You got some work to do. You guys are doing the work. It's just been an amazing conversation, Ryan. And again, I'm talking to Ryan Pavel, U.S. Marine Corps veteran, leads the Warrior Scholar Project. And, this is what I'm going to remember for a while. Thank you so much.
Thanks a lot, Travis. Much appreciated.
Semper Fi, Ryan. Hey, if you are a veteran looking to continue your educational journey, I'll have the link in the Oscar Mike Radio website post and show post. Check it out like I have done. It could be life-changing. Thank you.
Remember on it teaches our mission. We care about it and we do it every day. But I think there are things that just hit you and give you a reason to go on. The theme for our 2024 from Reach Across America is Live with Purpose. It just seemed to fit in with the vows of the REAP, the 10 attributes that we feel represent our United States military. I thought, what a great opportunity to put those two things together and show our kids through how we act some of the things that can make their lives better, their communities better, and by doing that, the country better. For me, Live with Purpose, I think, it's a mindset. Set some guidelines and then go out and purposefully make life different, make a change. It's an opportunity to set an example.
Thank you for listening and watching Oscar Mike Radio, where our active duty service members and veterans are in action and the mission is in flight. Oscar Mike Radio is an oversized load Co-Sinister One production. If you are a veteran or know a veteran who needs help, please dial 988 and press 1 for the Veterans Crisis Line.